Hello, everyone, and welcome to America Offline. Today we have Christina Malecka on the podcast. Christina, how you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you here. Good to have you. So why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what you're up to nowadays?
Yeah. So how far back should I go? So my original career was I worked as a community organizer. So I worked on environmental justice issues and corporate accountability issues. So on a lot of community building topics with a social change focus. And then about 20 years ago, I went back to school to become a psychotherapist. So I'm a licensed mental health counselor. I'm sort of a helper type person. I like to be helpful. And there's a personality test called the Enneagram where my type is literally helper. So there's a whole other podcast on when that's not helpful. But so I went back to school to become a psychotherapist, and I have been a therapist for about 16 years now, and working with a lot of issues, but primarily trauma. I mean, most therapists do a lot of work with trauma. So I've been doing my therapy, and I was a therapist before Facebook was really very popular. I was a therapist before smartphones. So I sort of had this front row seat to watching people respond to some of this technology. And like your other guests, I want to say that I'm not an anti-tech person. I'm just like really wanted to advocate for people to have balance and awareness about how they're using it. So
Totally.
I noticed, Facebook, it's a great way to connect with people all over the world, but it's also, you can, for the rest of your life, know what your ex is doing. You know when your friends are going out to brunch without you. I mean, we know that there's so many issues with social media and depression and anxiety and FOMO and all of that. So I really watched people struggle with that. The other thing was watching communication move from phone-based and email-based to text-based. Because text messaging causes people a lot of anxiety because it's so unclear and we don't have clear etiquette in how we use it. So we're always trying to interpret what's happening. It actually causes people tons of anxiety and suffering. And I remember when people first started coming in and talking about these really intense conversations they were having with loved ones and their partners. And I realized they were having them on text message.
Right.
And text messages is like, it's a great form of communication for I'm running late. Even like, I love you, I'm thinking about you, but for a long, detailed emotional conversation, it really often makes things worse. And then also just the always on culture and how much stress that's causing people.
Right.
And so I was kind of seeing this, and in 2016, I realized that I wasn't doing a great job with my own tech life balance, and I was spending a lot of time. I'm really bad about spending a lot of time on my laptop. And I was spending more time on social media than I wanted to, and it just felt like I was kind of being run by it. So I took myself on a week-long retreat with no screens. So no phone, no laptop, no desktop, no TV. And I thought it would be really easy, and it was actually really hard.
Right.
It was way harder than I thought it would be. And it was also way more transformative than I thought it would be. So for the first 3 days, I was just jonesing. And really uncomfortable and really agitated. And at about day 3, I started kind of drop back into my body and feel a lot of relaxation and peace and just move into this place of insight and evaluation of my life, deep connection with friends and my partner. And I felt amazing. I was able to sort of get out of my own way and get out of this looping circular thinking and commit to practices that I've kept up since that time, like an ongoing meditation practice. You and Tiffany were talking about a gratitude practice, like a daily gratitude practice. And I've also been able to sort of, for the most part, manage my relationship with technology better since that time. So came back from that, and I have a background in community organizing, group facilitation, change making. And I was like, I should start these retreats. I should do retreats. Really not having any idea what I was doing, to be honest. Just like, oh, I'm going to do retreats and people will come to them. And people did. Actually, so I've run 4 retreats since 2017, and I'm continuing to grow that. And we'll talk a little bit more about the ways in which I want to make that work accessible to everybody, because it's not possible for everyone to go on a retreat all the time. But that's kind of the history and what I'm up to, and like really working on teaching people what to do when they're not, we talk about digital detox, and I'm go beyond that into like, when I think of detox, I think of something bad that you have to get rid of.
Yeah, for good,
And
right? Yeah,
exactly. And that,
right,
or else you go off of it for a while and just go right back to your old ways. And I'm
right.
more interested in mindfulness and sustainability. So
Yeah.
that's my backstory.
Cool. Awesome. So there's the bunch to piece out there: text messaging, always on culture, tech life balance. For some reason, we haven't got into texting too much on the show. And I kind of want to lean into that a little bit, because texting for me personally it causes me anxiety too. Someone texts me, they want a response, and like, I'm just not always good at texting. And then like there's text threads too, where like I need to be showing up in these
Yeah.
threads to like see my friends. And it seems like text threads have replaced going out to dinner as a friend group. So can you
Yeah.
dig in a little bit more on text messaging, and like what can we do actionably so that text messaging is not impeding on our ability to have deep conversation, which it
That's a
seems
great
for
comment.
me,
Yeah.
yeah, it seems like you can only just get skin deep via text, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question. I mean, one thing to know is, we talk about, depending on who you talk to, 60 to 70% of communication is body language.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing you're missing with text messaging is body language. You don't hear like vocal tone, you don't see facial expression, you don't see body language. And so that's one of the reasons that it makes us so anxious.
Right.
And I think that it also, humans have a natural shyness and social anxiety, just a little bit. We kind of have to push ourselves to go into new social situations or to talk to people, and texting kind of allows us to hide behind the phone, and not engage in that discomfort. Like, a lot of work I do with people is helping them to push past that.
Right.
I think that you're right. I think that people are we're relying too much on text communication. I'm certainly guilty of this at times. I think it is overwhelming. One of the things that's really hard for me is it's hard to be accountable with via text, because I can't mark it as unread. Like, that's just, maybe there's some way to do that, but it's like you look at it and then it's gone. You know what I mean? Like, you don't have a
Right.
way to really track it.
Right.
And then also there's no agreed upon etiquette for text. So
Mm-hmm.
some people answer text right away, some people don't. So there's this huge piece of silence. And what does the silence mean? And what does someone's non-response mean? Does it mean they forgot? Does it mean they're blowing me off? Does it mean they're mad at me? And so I think, texting is here to stay. One thing that I do, and I sent you a voice memo, but I often will use the voice memo function on my phone to send people voice memos.
Yeah.
I have rheumatoid arthritis in my hand, so actually typing on a phone isn't very comfortable for me. So that's been a great workaround for me, just to send someone a little voice memo, and then I let people know, if you want to type back, that's totally fine. But I really love hearing a clip of someone's voice,
Yeah.
and using text in that way. And then I also just think, when a text thread starts to get really out of control,
Oh God.
just being like, just be like, hey,
Too
let's just
much.
get
Yeah.
together. Let's
Yeah.
just go have dinner or get
Yeah.
together. It's just too much to track. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot there. We could probably do like 45 minutes on just like texting.
We
I had a
could.
funny thing the other night. My mother, I have an amazing family, amazing mom. And her friend set up a birthday party for her, but she missed her flight, or if like I canceled, and so she couldn't do the birthday party. And so the next night they redid the birthday party at this really nice place. And I was like, Mom, I was like, how do you like develop such, like, she has so many friends, like so many people care about her. And I was like, what do you
Yeah.
do? And she's like, I really work on my relationships. And I was like, that's awesome. Like, but what do you really do? Like, how do you show up? She's like, I call my friends. Like, I call them just to like check in. And I feel just like calling people just to talk, like back in the day, even when I was
I know.
young, and I'm pretty young, like I remember like in high school, we used to just like call people just to talk. How could we
Yeah.
can you speak to that a little bit? Because
I
that's
would
kind of going by
love
the
to
wayside
reclaim
a little
that.
bit.
I would
Yeah.
love to reclaim that.
Yeah.
I'm 52. I'm a Gen Xer, so like I have
Yeah.
lots and lots of memories of long phone calls with people. Um, I hear a lot from younger people that phone calls make them anxious.
Yeah.
They feel anxious. And that kind of goes back to that social anxiety piece. And if you don't have to push yourself to do something, you generally won't.
Right.
So it's easier to default to that. So I think some of it is about just like, one thing I talk about a lot is that we can do hard things. That changing these habits is hard. It's not going to be easy, but we can do the hard things. And maybe it's that you start out with a goal of, depending on what your anxiety level is, like maybe one phone call to a friend a week or one phone call to a friend a month. But sort of reconnect in that way, because you just get so much out of a phone call. I think we're also so busy.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
Well, no, it's just so much deeper. Like I can cover so much more ground in a 5-minute phone call with my buddy from New York that I haven't spoken to in a month. And we could get into all this. Oh, you got back from your trip from India. We could talk about it. You just can't really do that via text. And therefore, our relationships are just becoming a little bit more dull, and we're not showing up for each other in that really meaningful way and really getting to know each other's ins and outs. And I think that's one of the causes of the declining mental health. So moral of the story, call your friends,
Call your friends.
Yeah.
And I mean, like expanding beyond that, send birthday cards, call people on their birthday.
Yeah.
Facebook kind of ruined birthdays. I think
know.
Facebook ruined birthdays.
Yes.
And so I have a thing now where I will see on Facebook it's someone's birthday, and I will call them to wish them happy birthday, and then I'll make a note in my calendar for the next year to send them a card. Just like, because it's so easy to write a birthday message or to hit a heart or hit a like or send a text. So there's just this element of like showing up for each other. It feels so good.
Yeah.
I agree. When you do it.
Yeah.
On both ends.
Totally.
Yeah.
Awesome. Love that. So you mentioned, and I'm curious, and question is for anyone who's in front of their computer every day, which is, I don't know, maybe 95% of America who is in front of a computer every day, particularly people like us who are kind of on the entrepreneurship path or self-employed. Like we need to be in front of our screens all day. So my question for you as someone who, works in this space, what was it like for you, or what are some of the things that you've developed as far as like a personal practice so that you could continue to do the work that you need to do in front of the screen, but also maintain a little bit of balance so that it's not sort of overrunning your life and causing burnout and all that stuff? Can you dig in on that a little bit? Yeah.
Yes, that's a really great question. So there's a few things. One is my morning routine. So I can talk a little bit more about this, but one thing about our screen time is that I'm not a neuroscientist, but very basically we have these two nervous system states, right? We have the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight, and we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like rest, digest, social connection. And so the time we spend on our screens has us in this kind of constant state of sympathetic nervous system, just this like low level anxiety and stress all the time. And so when I think about my sort of self-care around technology, it's about how do I move myself into that parasympathetic state. And that's something I do with clients a lot too. So for me, I think to start, if I don't have any tech in my bedroom, I have an alarm clock. I don't have any tech in my bedroom. I do use a Kindle because my eyesight's getting really bad. And so I can like pop, but I don't go on the internet on it or anything. And then when I get up in the morning, I used to have this really bad habit of getting up in the morning and immediately getting on my computer, because I had this idea that my sharpest time is in the morning. My best thoughts are in the morning. I've got to like jump into that stream of stress. And what I've started to do is actually get up in the morning, write in my journal. This can take 15 minutes, right? Write in a journal, read a really inspiring book, read a few pages of a really inspiring book, play some music, do some gentle movement. Even if I don't have the time to do a full workout that morning, just interrupting that impulse to get on my screen right away creates more ability to do it. And so that's really helpful. I don't check my email unless I have time to answer email. So if that's something that people can do, it's really life-changing, because when we're constantly checking our email when we don't have time to answer it, we just have this anxiety, like, oh my God, there's all these emails piling up and people want to hear from me. And so I keep my email closed unless I actually have time to sit down and answer it. When I get home from work, I put my computer and phone in another room, and I charge them in another room, and I'm not on them.
Right.
So those are the things that have been really just fundamentally helpful for me. I don't look at my phone when I'm walking down the street. So in Seattle, everybody is just like, everyone's just walking down the street, shuffling along on their phone.
It's not just
and
Seattle, Christine. It's
I
everywhere. I
know
was
it's
just in Poland.
everywhere.
It's the same thing. Like it's
Ugh,
a global thing, right? I mean, it's not just
yeah.
that, it's
And it's not our fault. I mean, I think it's really important to think about like the ways in which this technology is made to hook us. It's not like we're bad or we're weak. It's that like we're responding in the way that the creators of a lot of this want us to respond to it.
right.
But so I have a rule of not having my phone out, not looking at my phone. I walk to work every day. If I do need to get on my phone, like I have an idea and I want to write it down, or I want to switch to another podcast, I stop, I move to the side of the sidewalk, and I do it, and then I just keep walking. So
Right.
that's been really helpful for me to just be intentional. And then I, as a middle-aged white lady, I can, for the most part, I'm fairly non-threatening to most people, and I can walk down the street and make eye contact with people.
Mm.
I can smile at people. When I was younger, that was like an invitation sometimes for someone to hit on me, or it wasn't safe, it wasn't comfortable. But one of the best things about aging is that I can smile at anybody. And so I just think it's pretty cool to walk with your eyes up and to look at people in the eye. It just feels great. So
I agree. I
yeah.
think we could spread the love just by smiling and spreading good vibes to other people. And something
Yeah.
else similar to like what you said is like, yeah, like if I'm standing in line at Walgreens getting a prescription, like nowadays, everyone's looking down. I actually learned this from my dad. He's constantly, this is new word I've been using because I've getting into this whole experience design thing of like co-creation, and you're constantly co-creating, and he's constantly making conversation and meeting people and talking to them. And it's like, you never know what you're going to learn or who you're standing next to in line. And once you start doing that, a whole world of possibilities opens up to you. Like maybe try talking to the Uber driver. I don't know, like there's
Oh
some,
yeah, always.
like,
Always.
little things
Yeah.
like that. You never know what you're going to learn. And I feel like it's so much easier just to get onto our phone. But I think that there's so many benefits to just being a little, just looking up and being a little more wide-eyed and being a little more curious as to who the person is next to you and what you can maybe offer them or learn from them. So what you said totally resonated with me.
Yeah, absolutely. It brings so much joy.
Yeah.
It's so great to feel like I just connected with this person. I talked to this person in the elevator. I told them their shoes were cool, whatever. Just looking up is a
Yeah.
good thing.
I got kind of a more, I guess you can say it's a more niche pointed question about email, because I think something, for the listeners out there, everybody in some way, I would like to think, has some sort of an issue with email, myself included. I mean, it feels good to check email. You never know what you're going to get. It's like, it is very much like the whole, Tristan Harris slot machine type thing. And my question is, and I'm trying to figure this out, and I've asked other guests this too, but I tell my friends, like, I bet I could get you more efficient and make you close more deals just by limiting the amount of time you spend on the email. And they're like, I need to respond to every email in 10 minutes. And I'm like, but is that really true? Is that really, really true? So my question is, if I was working in a company, Christina, and I did want to change the norms of this always on culture, always responding to email, checking email 11 o'clock at night, first thing in the morning, on vacations, on weekends, what are the steps you could take to start creating a little bit of change as far as the norms within your own company?
Yeah, that's a
Tough
great
question.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because we talk about, one of the reasons that I sort of resist getting super into individual tips, like tips for people, is that it puts all of the responsibility on us as individuals. It's kind of like, telling people that if you just recycle, climate change will be resolved. Like there's a much bigger socio-political economic issue here that's driving all of this. And it's coming from tech companies. And it's also coming from companies that expect their employees to be on 24/7. And I really think over the next 10 years, that will be considered an abuse. That will be like officially considered an abusive business practice. And people will stop doing that because they'll realize that when they require that from their employees are completely scattered, stressed out, and they're not getting the best work from them. So I will do sort of digital wellness events for corporations. So a lot of companies have wellness programs. And
Mm-hmm.
before I will go in and talk to their employees about digital wellness or well-being, I actually meet with the leadership. I'm like, I need to talk to who's in charge of making these decisions and what the expectations are, because I don't want to come in and give people these tips and have them be like, well, I have to be online,
Right.
24/7. So I think that we could have a whole other conversation about this. I think it's providing the evidence to these employers about why this is actually, they're not getting great work out of people when they
Totally.
expect this.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also there are definitely employment situations where you will get fired if you don't answer email. Unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
there's some companies in Seattle who require that of their employees, but a lot of times it's our own anxiety. It's like you were saying, it's our own anxiety because we see that little red button, the little red thing, and we're like, oh
Notification.
my
Yeah.
God. Yeah, it's like it interacts with this kind of like deep social need we have for human connection. Like in Paleolithic times, we had to connect with people or we would die. Like we had to
Right.
get along with people and connect. And
Mm.
so it makes us feel like something that's not an emergency is an emergency.
Right.
So I think, making the case to your company and to your company's leadership with evidence for why this is not the most efficient way to communicate, and then working with people around, okay, what's the reality here? Do you really need to respond every 10 minutes? Could you chunk this out into 3 times a day? On my private practice email, I have a private therapy practice, and in addition to doing my retreats, I actually have a autoresponder that says I check email once a day, Monday through Friday. If you need to reach me immediately, please text me. It may take up to 72 hours for me to get back to you. And luckily in my industry, I can do that.
Right.
Not everybody else can, but I mean, there can sometimes be a way to create those sorts of boundaries.
Yeah. And to
Yeah.
your point about how in time we may as a society move to, hey, like 6 o'clock, like actually the email servers shut off. That's actually being done in
Yeah.
France. And I believe there's a few other countries. And I think there are some American companies that are starting to do that too, where their Slack messaging systems and things like that will turn off. And I'm sure
That's
in
so cool.
time, it would be really cool to see the data that would back saying, hey, look, this company, since they've started this, their revenues are shooting up, retention is improving, just employee happiness and just the ability to bond and
Yeah.
communicate. I'd love to see some data on that. I'm sure someone's starting to look at that, but my
Yeah,
hypothesis is that we would start to see so many positive benefits of just being a little bit more offline as opposed to constantly be replying.
totally. And, another thing is that I don't want to set the expectation for people that I'm going to reply right away.
Right.
Because if you set that expectation, then you have more anxiety about
Mm.
it. So if I am, say, catching up on email on a Sunday, because I just want to get that taken care of before I start my week, I don't send it out till Monday after 9
Yeah.
a.m.
Mm.
because I don't want people to expect to get answers from me on Sunday, because a lot of times on Sunday, I don't want to be answering emails. So I think there's also thinking about what is the message you're sending to people and the expectation you're setting by responding in this anxious way to email. So
Right.
that's
And there's a
great.
great system. I actually haven't used it yet, but there's something called Boomerang where I believe you can, like, if you're emailing on a Sunday, you could actually schedule it, like interacts with like a G Suite, and you could schedule it to go out on Monday at 10:30 instead.
Cool.
So there's a lot of little tools like this. Actually, little for the listeners out there, I use something called Batched Inbox, and it sends
Mm-hmm.
me, it was $100 a year, so it's kind of pricey. I do think there's other systems that are probably cheaper, but I get my emails at 11 and 4 p.m. every day. And I could still
Oh,
go in and check
cool.
if I was really waiting for something important, but it'll just send me them at 11 and 4 o'clock every day. So I'll just typically just respond at those 2 times, and that's it. But there's a lot of,
That's awesome.
there's inbox when ready. There's a whole bunch of things, but
Yeah.
one really easy thing that I've done, Christina, also is I've just taken my email. I just don't get email notifications anymore, and I've taken the email off the homepage of my smartphone, and I take it off like of my Mac. I've taken it off the bottom right there. So it's just, I don't have the temptation to check it. and I'm constantly replying, I could get into a state of deep work where like I'm booking my own time and I'm intentional about it, as opposed to getting pulled into other conversations or emails and stuff. So I think it's really important to
I
go
do
through your
too.
days, without being constantly feeling like you have to reply every second.
Absolutely. Yeah. And keeping it closed, keeping the notifications off and keeping it closed.
Yeah.
I forgot to turn on DND during this conversation. I just received 2 texts and it's really distracting.
Yeah. Oh,
You know?
totally is. Yeah. Before I was working off of Google Docs a lot, I would actually turn my computer on airplane mode, and just turn the internet off. And so I would have like zero temptations. And I think there's a lot of little hacks, but I think to my point is like, it's really good to have like your own personal little practice. Like what works for Christina and works for David is going to be completely different to Mike and Bob, but it's nice to have your own little practice of like something that works for you.
Yeah. And I also tell people, if this is really hard for them and building some sort of like digital mindfulness practice, to start with one thing.
Yeah.
Start with one thing and push through how hard it is and master that. We talk about how it takes, I can't remember how many hours to develop a habit, a lot.
Yes.
We're using these parts of our brain when we're online that are really good at like, information analysis, managing data, but we're not using the parts of our brains that just allow for like deeper contemplation. And I just lost my train of thought. Anyway,
That's
what
the
were we
monkey
talking
mind.
about?
Yeah. Speaking of losing concentration, it totally happens. Yeah. I find like as I'm getting older, that happens too. Like I'll just be speaking and I'll just like, what the heck was I just saying?
Wait till you're 52. Wait till you're 52.
Yeah. So anyways, I wrote a note down. I want to talk a little bit about your retreats, maybe not specifically your retreats, but just the idea of a retreat. We can get specific, but the idea of a retreat in general, because I have a similar experience to you in that every August we go on a family vacation, and I just turn my phone off completely, and it's usually like a 5-6 day thing, but I'll spend like 4 days off my phone. And the first 2 days or so are pretty tough. But then after the third day or so, it's like I get into this place where like I'm just very quiet inside and just that much more reflective. And I'm just taking notice of things more around me. And then I shared this on the podcast with Tiffany, which you heard, was that like after I'm done, it's like I'm relapsing. And I'm not saying that cell phones are a drug, but it's like I pick up my phone, I'm like, I don't want that.
Yeah.
But like, can you talk about like just that, maybe some of the outcomes or the process of unplugging for an extended period, and then how someone might be able to create this in their own life, whether it was at your retreat or just going on a vacation? Dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, retreats, the idea of retreat has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, first starting in sort of religious traditions, of this idea of going someplace to move into a different state. And so with my retreats, what I want is for people to just get into a more expansive state. So once again, talking about the sympathetic nervous system. So everything that I do is designed to help people get into that. So getting in nature, like spending time outside, is like a wonderful thing. There's something called attention restoration theory, where there's proof that when you go hiking and you're like, that was amazing, I should do that every day, I feel so good.
Yeah.
That's a real physiological state, right?
Yeah.
And it makes us more able to sort of interact socially. It makes us feel really good. So I think that's really important. I think that when it really comes down to it, I mean, I could talk all day about this and what I do on the retreats and what they're about, but it's about getting space to really check in with yourself. So I want to give people space to get quiet and to check in with themselves and to ask themselves some questions about who they are and what they're really passionate about, because we're not going to spend less time on screens if we don't have a good idea of what we're really passionate about. When you were talking to, is it Cam? I wrote his name.
Cam Adair, game
Cam.
quitters. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, he talked about this too, of like, people aren't going to be motivated to change their habits unless they they really have something else that's important to them. And we are on screens all the time. We don't have space to think about that. So I think it's about, setting aside that time to really do some deep diving into what's really important. How do I want to show up in my life, and setting aside that time. So that's why I think retreat is really important. And we're so used to being in this tech-induced stress state all the time that getting a break from that is helpful. So that's, and then also like, I can talk about I have a do-it-yourself guide for my retreats that I can share with your listeners, but there's all sorts of practices like meditation. Meditation literally increases the gray matter in your brain for concentration, deep thinking, emotional connection, movement, like making sure you're moving, connection with other humans. So when I do retreats, a lot of it is about encouraging people to connect with each other, and sort of go deep with that so that we can remember how good that feels. So there's lots of reasons to go on retreat.
Yeah. I just got back from, I think I might have told you this, it's called the College of Extraordinary Experiences. I'm happy to plug it on this podcast because it was extraordinary and there was very little tech used, but it was, the ability to slip in and out of deep, meaningful conversation with people was so impactful for me, just because it's hard. Like it feels good to be able to talk about life and meaning and passions and purpose. And you don't get that every day. And now I'm like part of this community, and it just feels so good to be in a community of like-minded people where we sort of experience something meaningful together. Have you found, how can people, I guess, like you said, you did like a lot of community building, but like, how can people get more of this in our lives? Like more, maybe just even just with random people, but like create more community, more connection, whether it be just, with them and other people or their whole families, within their neighbors. But I feel like there's less of that happening, and we need more of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think leading by example. So being the person who makes the phone call rather than sending the text.
Right.
Eating meals together, like having people come together for meals. That's an incredible way to, without phones, no phones,
right?
Not even on the table. I'm sure you've seen that research that
Yeah.
about like even having a phone on the table degrades the quality
empathic connection. I think it was Sherry Turkle who was big on that.
Yes.
Yep.
Sherry Turkle is my jam. So,
awesome.
I mean, she's the one who really got me super interested in this. Like reading her books was really inspiring for me. It's a really big catalyst for me. So I think that actually doing the work, like you talked about your mom, of creating those social gatherings. I don't know about you, but in my life, I find that people get together in person much less often.
Yeah.
When I was younger, there were a lot more dinner parties, gatherings, hangouts, because that was really the only way we were, we could talk on the phone, we could send an email, but the only way we were really going to have like a sense of who the other person was by being in person, having in-person face-to-face communication. And with social media, we kind of have the illusion of that, but it's not really happening. So doing the work to bring people together. My friend Doreen Doggin McGee, she's amazing. She wrote this book called Devised. I could plug it all day long. She's incredible. She talks about throwing boredom parties. So she talks about having a party and inviting people and being like, don't bring anything. There's no plan. There's no agenda. Like if you want to bring some random food, you can do that. And then people coming together, putting away their phones and being like, okay, what are we going to do?
That to me is what co-creation is all about. It's like, let's just see what happens and just let us be humans and not have to have a plan. And I think when you create those types of spaces, real magic unfolds, to be honest. One Sherry Turkle quote came up to me when you were speaking. It's that social media offers the illusion of companionship without the demands of friendship. And I would agree. And I've actually talked about this with boomers too. And even boomers would agree as well, because they are really into their devices and especially Facebook.
Oh, totally.
They're getting together with their friends way less. There
Yeah.
was actually an interesting Atlantic article, which I'll send to you, which I encourage listeners to look up, that says, it was just called "Why You Get Together with Your Friends Less." And I think at the end of the day, it just requires effort nowadays. It's so easy
Yes.
just to text your buddies, or to reach out to 6 of them and let them know about something that just happened. But it just takes effort and a little bit of more planning, but you can do it with just a little more effort. I mean, that's what it comes down for me, because
Yeah.
I was very social, and I still am, but I rarely see my friends, and it kills me, and I just want
Yeah.
more of it. And so it
Yeah.
just,
And you're right. It's cross-generational, because I
yeah.
think that people complain about millennials,
Hmm.
but my peers are just as bad. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I think it's so unfair to talk about one generation's use of technology when we're all struggling with this.
Yeah.
The other thing about throwing dinner parties is, I think there's this idea that you have to like plan and make this incredible meal and make it a big deal. You can just be like, come over, let's order pizza.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
I hear you. And you
Yeah.
said something that was very, it was subtle, but I think it's important, is that some people that I know of, and it's fine, they won't make the first step, because they're like, oh,
Mhm.
my friends haven't reached out to me, like, screw them, like, they don't want me. But it's like, if you just be like the bigger person and make a little bit more effort, like, I promise you it's going to be reciprocated in time. But like, swallow a little bit of pride if you really do care about the relationship, and just reach out. And for me
Yeah.
personally, as someone who's in sometimes been like a bit of a glue for my friend group, like, I just do that, and and therefore I feel like I learned it from my mom. But my relationships have really
Yeah.
blossomed, and I've been able to not just build great relationships, but maintain them. But it just takes, you can't get bitter when they're not reaching out to you, because everyone's busy
Mhm.
nowadays. And especially, I'm 32. I'm living in the Bay Area. Everybody is head down, working hard, trying to make it. Um,
Yeah.
but sometimes we just need to take a step back and be like, hey, like, there's this great show Saturday night. Let's just freaking go. Boys' night out. Like, let's go.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's funny. That just reminds me, I went to a wedding a few weeks ago of a dear friend who used to live in Seattle. And he lived in Seattle for like 20 years. And so for his wedding, a lot of people from Seattle were there, and the people who are really good friends
Hmm.
that we just don't see as much of each other anymore, because everyone's busy. People are raising kids. People are in a really generative place in their careers. And it was basically 3 days of hanging out with these people. We hadn't really had that time together, and it was so much fun.
Right.
It was amazing. We all felt
Mm.
high. It was
Yeah.
incredible. It
Right.
was such a good reminder of how important it is to get together more often. And I think we really made commitments to do that. But like, that was the best time I've had in years,
Yeah.
honestly. Just being with people who I enjoy and love.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You mentioned weddings, and I actually have this personal practice. I've got 2 weddings coming up, and I'm going to do the same thing.
Mhm.
And I just, because when you're at a wedding, I mean, I do have a baby, so I need, like, if the baby's not
Yeah.
there, I need to, like, but usually, so especially if I'm alone and my wife's not there, I know she's on top of the baby. I'll leave my phone in the hotel room, and I'll
Oh,
capture
yeah.
like 9 hours of just me being present without my phone. And it's just very liberating. And I've gotten
Mm.
used to it. I think it might've been hard the first wedding or two. Um, but now it's just part of what I do. But I guess, how can you create more of these, like, I think it's important to create these unplugged spaces for you, like, on a daily basis. Can you speak to how it's
Mhm.
or like, incorporating that into your daily life a little bit, like, at night, or just finding more time just to be off,
Mhm.
um, just daily, just creating more space on a daily basis.
Yeah. I mean, kind of, in terms of what you're talking about, it's like so simple, but so hard.
Yeah.
It's so simple to just
Right.
charge it in another room, and yet it's so hard. So I think the
Yep.
first step is just working with how hard it is. You know what I mean? Like, not
Right.
expecting to just be able to like make that happen.
Right.
I
Baby
think
steps, like you
having
said too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that having something you're really looking forward to. I come home from work. My son's grown. He's 25, so he's not at home anymore. But when he was at home, we sat down as a family to dinner with no phones. It was super, super important to talk about our day, to talk about something we're each grateful for that day, and to have that connection. And when I come home, my partner and I, we put away our phones and we sit and have a meal together. And, last night I got home and put away my phone, and he and I just sat and talked, just across from each other. So I think when you're putting the phone away, think about what are you going to do instead that's going to feel really good, because what's going to make you pull you into that parasympathetic state? Do some stretching, do some yoga, take a warm bath, call a friend, connect with somebody, hug your pet.
Right.
Like, don't just think about being off your technology, but think about what you're going to do instead.
Yeah.
Have some really, really books, whatever you're into. If you're into romance novels, if you're into historical fiction, if you're into biographies or memoirs, like, have a stack of just like really great books, maybe even some trashy books that are guilty pleasures, to really get into. So yeah, there's just so many ways, and it's, the more you do it, the more it feels so good.
Yeah, I agree. I had a lunch with a dad today who just offered to take me out, and he was like, "Hey, I got some ideas for your business." I was like, "All right, cool. Like, let's go. Like, it was great." And we, phones are away. We spoke for an hour about many different topics, and we got into talking about his, him and his son, and he's really into what I'm doing. And he said that what they've been doing is they've been playing chess at night together
Oh,
after they
cool.
unplug. And I was like, wow, that's so cool, because I've been recommending board games at night,
Yeah.
but it might seem a little hokey for some, but
Mm-mm.
it like, first of all, I don't think so, but I think like, yeah, just like playing chess, like it's so good in so many different ways. Like it's
So good for
offline.
your brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like just, but yeah, to your point, like just finding more things to make us feel rich and alive. Like it's so easy. Like I looked at my wife like a year or two ago. I was like, why does every night have to be sitting on a couch watching TV most of the time, like stupid TV, like
Yeah.
Kardashian. Sorry, Kardashian fans out there, but like, just like silly
Right.
reality TV
Yeah.
stuff that's just like, and yeah, I get it. Like we just worked all day. Like, of course, like there's going to be times like, it is soothing sometimes to flip through, social media for a few minutes, so not a big deal, but if
Yeah.
it's every single night, I mean, you could really work yourself into like this kind of a rut of where it's like,
Right.
I'm just kind of bland now. It's just work, TV, eating, work, TV, eating, and then I just can't wait for the weekends. And it's like, how can we find those moments of awe and inspiration and fun and learning throughout the course of the week and weave it in? That's been really important to me. And my wife and I, we've been working at it together.
Yeah, it's great. I think it's great if you have a partner to work on it with your partner, to work on it with your kids. I'm just like really inspired by Tiffany Schlane's stuff on taking a tech Shabbat.
Oh yeah.
It's just, I feel so much envy. I'm like, could I do that? I have a full-time private practice and I'm trying to do this other entrepreneurial thing. So I'm like, boy, I would really like to get to a place where I'm able to take a day off.
Yeah.
That sounds just wonderful. And in the meantime, I'm taking, hours off. I'm taking 4 hours off a night before I go to bed.
Yeah.
I'm taking an hour off before I get on in the morning.
Yeah.
So,
I think that like hour before bed and that hour right when you wake up is like the most important
it
thing.
makes
Like we
all the difference.
could be on devices all day, and we often are, but if we could just capture like an hour of being non-responsive and just be alone with ourselves and our family and our loved ones and do things that make us feel good, that could really switch things around, and that will change this whole digitally addicted climate in time. I hope is, but it's going to take more people like you and me spreading the word out there. And I believe it's going to take some. I believe it's going to happen. I still think we're a little early, as you're out there trying to market. You do great marketing, but there needs to be more of it. And I think in time it's going to happen. People will wake up to it a little bit.
Yeah, I think that we're like part of this like very emerging social movement. And I kind of think about smoking,
Yep.
like I think about the thing that really turned the tide with smoking was like heavily invested, the government and other entities heavily invested in social marketing. So not social media marketing, but social marketing is basically marketing to change a behavior, to raise awareness and change a behavior. And we haven't really seen that yet with this. And I think that I would love to see that happen. I'd love all of us to start talking about how could we make that happen, because I think it will make all of our work so much easier.
Right.
Because I don't know about you. I mean, I'm the only person in Seattle who's doing work like this, and I often feel like I'm just screaming into a void.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You know, I think it's just going to take some time to get
Yeah.
people
Well,
to
I
realize.
agree. I just launched 2 new programs, and we spent
Yeah.
6-9 months developing them, market testing, and we've gotten people that are interested and people that have even donated, but you know, to figure out really how to kind of push them over the edge to like actually spend money because they think this is so important for them to develop some new healthy habits. That's tough, but I think it's on the way. And
It's possible.
yeah,
People are going to come to your retreats. I
yeah.
mean, you know, one of the people, the leader, the executive director at the Woodbey Institute, where I hold a lot of my retreats, when I first started doing this, she was like, Christina, it's a spiritual practice. You just have to have faith that people are going to come on this retreat. And it does take a ton of work. It
Yeah.
takes a ton of work to get people to come. But when they come, so the people who've come on my retreats tell their friends, and then the friends want to come, and people come back. And a lot of I don't have really a huge marketing budget. I do everything pretty much on my own. I have a
Right.
really wonderful social media assistant and
Mm.
someone helping me with booking. But a lot of it for me has just been about relationship building and talking to people. And, you know, if I can get in a room with people to talk about how important this is, they're more likely to make that connection and want to come. And like, you're out there
Right.
doing it. Like, people are going to come on your retreats.
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
Yeah, I
It's going to
appreciate that,
happen.
and I hope so too. So let's talk a little bit about your retreats. You have one coming up in March, I believe. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah.
like kind of what happens there? You know, who comes and what are some of the, not that we're always trying to get, you know, outcomes, but like, you know, how, like, just tell us a little bit about it.
Well, it's going to be amazing.
To
So
Mexico, right?
Mexico, it's in
Cool.
Troncones, Mexico, which is a really little town. It's not really like a tourist resort type. I mean, the place is really amazing and magical, but it's not
Hmm.
like going to like a compound tourist resort place. It's like,
Right.
I went there about 7 years ago on just a personal retreat, and I was like, oh my gosh, I want to bring a group here someday.
Mm.
So Christina Crook, who I highly recommend you talk to, from The Joy of Missing Out, JOMO.
Cool.
I read her book like earlier this year and was just like, oh my God, like we're speaking the same language. So I
Hmm.
wrote her a snail mail letter and said, hey, I love your work. Do you want to collaborate on a retreat? And she said, yeah. And so it's at this amazing, beautiful yoga retreat center. The people will be unplugged for the first 5 days. We're not sure if it's gonna be the first 4 or 5, it's 7 days. And then for the last 2 or 3 days, we're actually going to give people back their tech and help them to sort of like
Reintegrate it.
streamline it,
Yeah.
reintegrate it. How do
Yeah.
you use these tools when you've got your phone in your hand?
Mm.
And so, you know, there's just a lot also, you know, there's a huge, you know, the work that I do is there's a huge component around meditation, around self-reflection, around sympathetic joy is something I teach people, which is like learning how to have joy in someone else's good fortune.
Mm.
So just a lot of social engagement. People tend to
Yeah.
make really strong bonds and form community on the retreats that I work on. And Christina Crook is really about that too. So, you know, if people want more information, they can go to my website. I could talk about it all day. It's really going to be special. I think it's going to be really amazing.
Cool.
So that's happening. And then I have a retreat coming up in June. I kind of took a little bit of a hiatus from doing a lot of things I have to promote myself this year, just so I could pull back and have some more balance in my life. Cause I was working like there was a gun to my head, and it was
Hmm.
like, I'm
Right.
not
That's
practicing what
tough.
I'm preaching, you know?
Right. Yep.
And so I am doing a retreat near Seattle. It's on Whidbey Island in June. And
Cool.
that's information. And then I do custom stuff for people. So people will hire me to come and do like a custom experience for
Right.
them. But those are the two open to the public ones. So
Awesome. Where can people learn more about all this?
they can go to dmret.com. So it's digitalmindfulnessretreats.com or dmret.com. And,
Cool.
you know, one thing I want to say about retreats is that not everyone can afford a retreat. I try to make them as financially accessible as possible and not pick places that are super posh.
Hmm.
But people can't afford it time-wise. People can't afford it money-wise. And so I created this sort of DIY guide that takes you through the different steps in my retreats that's free. So people can go
Cool.
to my website to get the DIY guide, and then they can they can set aside time and do their own retreat at home. Oh, and
Nice.
I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Digital Mindfulness Retreats. No Twitter.
No Twitter. Yeah, you call it a Twitter. If we're all about offline, we gotta draw the line somewhere. I suppose.
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
Well, Christina, thank you so much for jumping on today.
Yeah.
You're doing such meaningful work, and you got so much great stuff to say. And I definitely learned a lot, and I hope the listeners enjoyed it too.
Yeah, it was really fun. It was great.
Cool. Thanks, Christina. We'll talk with you soon. Take care.